The spotted lanternfly is coming back. Last week, we began a conversation discussing this little insect that is making a huge impact on the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, and beyond. This week, Antonio Pineda of the Whitehall Environmental Advisory Council joins us as we continue that conversation and we take a look at what we can do in the community about this problem. All of that coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. Thank you so much for joining us. Last week, we began an incredibly important conversation about the spotted lanternfly. You probably remember seeing this throughout the Lehigh Valley and Pennsylvania region last year. And if experts are right, these little insects will be back with a vengeance later this spring and into the summer. I'm pleased to welcome back to Face the Issues our guest from last week, Antonio Pineda. Antonio, thank you again for joining us and for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Fun. We have a lot of fun on Face the Issues. That's the one rule that we have to play by here.
When I see a spotted lanternfly, I won't have fun anymore, but.
So let's get after it. Last week, we were talking about the history of this spotted lanternfly and a little bit of just what it is before we even jumped into the problem. Let's recap that a little bit for our viewers who might have missed last week's episode. And by the way, if you did miss last week's episode, you can catch that online. Just go to wbph.org. But let's recap that a little bit. What is the spotted lanternfly? And give us an overview of the problem and the issue that we're looking at here.
It's a tree hopping insect. It's about an inch long. It's got wings that have black spots on them, like an off-white color, grayish off-white color, and a red underbelly. It's plant hopping. It can fly. It has wings, but it doesn't fly as much as it hops from plant to plant. It feeds on tree sap for its nutrition, and it leaves weeping wounds in the trees, which can damage the trees and attract other insects, and also fungus can form on the trees. It likes fruit-bearing trees, hardwoods, hops, grapes, of that nature. And unfortunately, in our area, since 2014, since it's been introduced, there's no natural predator in the area that can control its population or a pathogen.
Where does this insect originate from? How did it get into the Lehigh Valley?
It originates from southern China, India, and Vietnam. It's native to, and it came here on a shipment, they believe, a shipment of stone into Berks County in 2014.
Okay. And how stone's not tree bark? Were they eggs that came in, or?
It will lay its eggs on any smooth surface it can find, which includes smooth bark trees, stones, house siding if it's smooth enough, cars, outdoor furniture. It doesn't discriminate smooth surfaces. It prefers the trees where it's feeding on because that allows the eggs to feed as well.
Okay. So just about anything outdoors can serve as a breeding ground for the spotted lanternfly. And then last week we also talked about that you were talking just now about the impact it has on the trees. It leaves these weeping wounds which can attract other insects. Ultimately can kill the tree, right?
Yeah, it can damage the tree enough to kill it.
Okay. What is the larger impact then upon the agricultural community as well as on the economy?
They have an estimated threat to the economy of $18 billion in Pennsylvania.
That's just Pennsylvania alone?
That's Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Threat of $18 billion for agricultural industry. And it's affecting the Christmas tree industry as well because people are afraid of buying them, which we discussed on last week's program. They're a nuisance and invasive species, and it's just a problem that just keeps growing.
And you're saying that largely impacts fruit trees, hops. We're talking about the wine industry in Pennsylvania, potentially the beer industry, the fruit and produce industry.
And hardwoods.
Hardwoods.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would impact potentially furniture. And then you also said there's the Christmas trees that you brought up. There's a secondary impact where they're probably really not on Christmas trees, but...
Not as prevalent as the other ones now.
But the fear that it's creating is driving that, and that industry gets hurt economically as well. How widespread right now is this problem?
In Pennsylvania, 13 counties in southeastern Pennsylvania. Lehigh, Northampton, up to Monroe, Carbon.
Okay.
It's a quarantine zone currently.
Down to Philly?
Philadelphia County. They were, I think last year was the first time they were saw. Don't quote me on that.
Okay. We won't.
I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but it's in Philadelphia now.
Sure. And you expect this to keep spreading?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any end in sight at this point?
Once we implement the strategies, the state government, federal government's spending millions to combat the issue. So hopefully we'll see an end in sight eventually.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can make it manageable.
Okay.
Possible.
Okay. And you say this has been an issue outside the U.S. as well. South Korea, this has been an issue, and they haven't had great success, but some success it looks like dealing with the issue. Let's get into talking about some of these potential solutions. First of all, what in your mind, you've talked about stopping the spread. Is that step one in this process? Where do we begin this conversation of putting an end to this problem?
In my opinion, the first step is make sure that quarantine zone doesn't expand.
Okay. Can you explain for our viewers what the quarantine zone is?
The quarantine zone is currently at 13 counties. It's been growing every year. It's basically where they've been seen in good numbers. You know, they may not just see one, but they see a bunch. And it's an area where the state government has put a regulation where the businesses have to have a permit to transport goods in and out, so they know best practices to make sure they're not spreading the lanternfly. Okay. And it's for the citizens as well, so that they're informed enough so that they know that they don't take this lanternfly out of the area. So it's a way to inform people that, hey, be careful, be cautious, make sure that when you're driving out of the area, you're not bringing any with you. And they're very easy to take places along for the ride. Sure.
Well, you're saying that they could lay their eggs in your car.
Yeah.
The other thing that you mentioned about the eggs is that they're not necessarily recognizable as eggs. This is not like a bird's nest.
Yeah, it's not. You're not going to look at it. Oh, that's an egg. It's a light-colored, grayish mud-looking substance on a tree that if you walk by, you may as well go, oh, that's just some dirt on a tree,
and not think twice.
Yeah, you don't think twice about it at all. And you got to be pretty observant to tell. But the main way you can tell is if you see spotted lanternflies on that tree in the summer, chances are they're going to lay their eggs
there. They're laying their eggs there as well. So you see these on these almost like mud splats, if you will, on trees.
Yes.
But as well as on houses, siding, cars, rocks.
Yeah, smooth surfaces.
So step one, stopping the spread. You talked about the quarantine zone. If you're an individual, if you're a business in the quarantine zone, you said they have to have a permit to transport things in and out.
There's a little class they have on Penn State's on the Penn State website. The state offers it. I think it's Penn State. I think it might just link to the state website where they can go to get a permit for this.
What if you're an individual in the quarantine zone? Our studio here is in the quarantine zone. A lot of our viewership is in the quarantine zone. Some are not, but a lot of them are. What should they know about this and about their travels if they're in the quarantine zone? And is there anything that they have to do?
Well, for them, just be observant. Make sure that you're not, your car doesn't have them on it. You're not carrying something. Obviously, it's harder for an individual to, you're not going to go get your car washed every time that you're going to leave the area. Sure. Especially if you work. Let's say you work over in northeastern Pennsylvania every day. Yeah. You're not going to go get your car washed every day.
Right.
But just be observant, just know. And then there's also strategies you can implement on your own as an individual to combat the issue.
And and we'll get into some of those strategies. And so the quarantine zone largely is for businesses then, and to keep businesses, to try to prevent businesses. Has this been effective? I mean, you said the zone is growing every year. How effective has the zone been, and what do you think? Are there other steps that we should take in addition to that?
I don't know if the quarantine zone itself has been effective. I think businesses have been, I think they follow it. I can't really tell. I'm not working with them directly. I'm not an expert on the agricultural industry or the business industry, trucking. But I think the main issue is that just because spotted lanternflies don't have a predator, they're going to spread,
right?
And they're able to breed more and more, and it just I think it's more of them winning out over the quarantine zone than the quarantine zone not working.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So even if we were to contain them into a certain geographic area, they're still going to grow in that area.
Yeah.
If we don't do something beyond containment.
Yes. There's strategies we need to implement beyond just a quarantine zone to combat it.
Okay. Let's talk about some of those. What has been attempted so far when it comes to targeting these spotted lanternflies?
Well, the main thing that people can do at your home is if you see it outside the quarantine zone, report it, because then the government can get on it.
Meaning if you live somewhere that's not in the quarantine zone,
yes,
and you see spotted lanternflies,
yes,
you should report it.
You should report it.
Okay, and to where?
There's a number on the Penn State Extension website and Pennsylvania Agriculture. They have
and
a
we'll
contact.
be sure to get our viewers that number as well.
That's great.
So you should call the hotline.
Yeah.
And report it if you're not in that quarantine zone.
Yes, if you see one out there, let them know, because the best thing we can do is to make sure that it doesn't become another member of the quarantine zone. Be a little proactive before it spreads.
Okay.
And then there's as a homeowner, you can eliminate the egg sacs.
Okay.
The easiest thing you do is you just basically take them and you scrape off the eggs and you put it into an alcohol solution in a Ziploc bag, and that'll kill them.
Okay. So get rid of the eggs is one of the first steps that an individual, a family, a homeowner should take in ending the spotted lanternfly problem. We don't go away. We will come back to this. There's many more solutions that we can cover, both that communities can take on, governments can take on, and individuals can take on. So don't go away. We'll come back to this. Fascinating conversation. Don't go away. We'll be back after these messages and continue our conversation on solutions to the spotted lanternfly problem. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Antonio, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing with us about this topic.
It's very important, and to let people know about it is very important. So that since it keeps coming back in the summer, hopefully, maybe it's not as bad, but I think it's going to be even worse.
And to your point earlier, and something you said last week as well, this is something that we all are familiar with. We all see them during the summer. But sometimes as we go through winter, it just becomes out of sight, out of mind. And you're warning our communities, don't forget about this problem, because it's going to hurt us in the long run. Yeah, it's the
fortunate but unfortunate thing about the fact that they only live one life cycle.
Sure, agreed. It's a blessing.
They go away.
It's a blessing and a curse. So when we left off, when we went to break, we were talking about different solutions. One of the first steps you said was we have to contain the problem. We're talking about the quarantine zone, talking about businesses that are in the quarantine zone, also individuals in and out of it. One of the things you said was that if you don't live in the quarantine zone, so some of our viewers perhaps out in Western Pennsylvania, if you're not in the quarantine zone and you see the spotted lanternfly, report it.
Yes.
Make sure we can track where they're showing up as a way of containment. You also mentioned that containment's not enough in this situation, that we actually have to go after the problem before the problem gets even further out of hand.
Because you and I both see it, and everyone probably sees it, how many there are.
Yeah.
It's an enormous number, and it needs to be controlled.
Yeah. Even if you just Google the spotted lanternflies on tree trunks and the images, it's like a mass invasion.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So one of the things you talked about was getting rid of the eggs and stopping it that way. And we'll get more into detail on each of these strategies. What are some of the other avenues that either governments or organizations have suggested or have tried?
Tree banding. What you do is if you see a tree that they're laying their eggs on, you put a band on the lower part of the tree, and what happens is the nymphs can't fly and they can't jump.
Okay.
So they want to go up to the younger parts of the tree to feed.
Yeah.
When they go up, the nymphs get stuck to the band. They don't feed.
Okay.
They die.
What kind of band are we talking about?
It's a sticky band.
Okay.
Yeah. Just they'll stick to it. Kind of like your fly traps.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Just goes around the tree. So that's one way you can attack them. And then there's also things you can do with the trees themselves. So like I mentioned in the previous program, the favorite tree in the world is the tree of heaven, which is also an invasive species of its own.
And that's also throughout Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's widespread because it's been here for centuries now.
Okay.
But one invasive species leads to the growth of another invasive species, unfortunately. And to identify that tree in particular, it has the bark looks like a cantaloupe. Kind of has like a cantaloupe texture to it. It's smooth, but it kind of looks like a cantaloupe. and its leaves are one stem, two leaves outward, and they're smooth on the end. They're not rigid, or there's no teeth marks on the end.
Okay.
They grow massive. They usually do not have trees, other plants around them, because they produce something that prevents other things from growing around them. Spotted lanternflies love them. So since they're also an invasive species, eliminating them it helps in two ways. It eliminates another invasive species and the spotted lanternfly.
Right.
Now the ones that they have two sexes, they have two genders, and the females produce a lot more seeds than the males.
Okay.
So eliminating the females entirely is one way of killing two birds with one stone.
Sure.
And then you want to set trap trees with the males, so banding them and then doing what they'll hack and squirt. So you cut them and you put a pesticide in them, which will kill the lanternflies when they feed on them, and also eventually kill the male trees.
Sure.
Now the thing about things about the tree of heaven that I mentioned in the previous program was the fact that they're resilient.
Right.
It's going to take you multiple attempts to kill them. You need to, when you cut them down, you need to use pesticides to kill them, because if you cut it down, it's just going to grow out of the stump. They keep going and going. They're like a weed. They're insanely difficult to eliminate.
Okay. One of the other things that ideas have been batted around is the idea of looking for a parasite or some kind of either natural a plant or an animal that will feed on or help get rid of the spotted lanternfly. You suggested that that's why they're not an issue in China, that they have a natural predator in China. There's no predator in the United States, apparently.
Yeah, there's not one that's enough to control its population enough. There's been some instances where people have seen praying mantises eat them. I don't know if you've seen many praying mantises. When I was a child, I saw them all the time, but now they're not as prevalent. Maybe we can increase the population numbers of praying mantises that do consume them. I think it has to be a certain type. They might want to see. Some people have said send a photo if you see one, so they know which type are. Introduce those areas where we see them in prevalence. In Korea, they've thought about parasitic wasps that have about a 68% effective rate. I think that's the number of eliminating them. Of course, when you introduce another species that's not native to the area, there's risks involved.
Right.
Praying mantises are native, so that wouldn't have as much. But if you bring in a parasitic wasp, you don't know what else it would feed on.
Right. That was my next question. I mean, is there concern that if we go and get whichever predator has in China and we introduce it to the United States, that we've stopped one problem, but we open the door for another?
Yeah, that is a concern. It's kind of like there was a Simpsons episode like that where there was these lizards, and then they brought in one thing, but then we're going to be overrun by them. And so, well, then we got to bring in those. Then we'll be overrun by them.
So at some point there is concern about what kind of predator we introduce.
Yeah, it is possible that what you introduce might have ill effects and harm as well.
Sure. So, you sit on the Whitehall Environmental Advisory Council.
Yes.
This is something that you're deeply passionate about. What if you're sitting with a local government, a state government, county government? What would you recommend? What steps would you recommend they take in attempting to fight this?
The number one thing is eliminating the tree of heaven.
Okay.
Eliminate their main food source. You're basically cutting them off at the knees.
Is that possible?
Absolutely. You can definitely mitigate it by eliminating tree of heavens. Bucks County, for instance, made a grant program for citizens to get money so they could cut down their tree of heavens and set up trap trees. Okay. So just that little bit can help people that own. If you own a lot of land, a lot of people have multiple tree of heavens. If you're a small property owner and you have one, just cut the tree, just get rid of the tree. But if you're someone that has multiple on your property, you can get rid of the females and set up the trap trees, which is an effective strategy.
So both ends of it, attack the tree of heaven, set up the trap trees. You find both those to potentially be effective.
Yes. And if you're a government and you have parkland, do the same thing in your parks.
Sure.
Set up tree bands, get rid of the tree of heavens in your own parks, because they're probably there because it's such a widespread tree.
Right. Obviously an investment, if they're a tree that's hard to kill, obviously it's going to take a little bit of an investment to do it.
Yeah.
Is it worth the potential negative impact on the economy to get rid of these?
Yes. It will cost way more. Look at the government spending millions of dollars to combat it as it is. And it's 18 billion number, how much it can affect all the area. A little investment to make sure that we can combat it and mitigate the problems before it gets even worse, is worth it for our economy.
Sure.
In my opinion.
One of the things you mentioned before, and you see this a lot, even just on social media, is people say if you see a spotted lanternfly, kill it. That's something you recommend?
Absolutely.
What if you see a lot? And we talked about those images that we all see of the tree trunks full of these spotted lanternflies. There are home remedies that some people are proposing. What's your take on the home remedies?
Don't use home remedies,
Okay.
because they can have a detrimental effect on the environment as well, or your vegetation, anything else around you. So, the vinegar.
Right. Vinegar and soap, I think, is the big one.
They're not proven to kill them, and they also can affect your environment as well in negative ways. The EPA and the state of Pennsylvania has a list of approved pesticides to combat the issue, to combat tree of heavens and other host trees they may have. So I wouldn't recommend. The risks outweigh the benefits of using home remedies.
Sure. It kind of defeats the purpose if you get rid of the pest, but you've killed the vegetation on your own.
Or if you've done something to the water in your area as well.
Oh, true. Yeah. That is very true. So you don't recommend the home remedies. If someone's going to use a pesticide, go to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection or the EPA and get that list.
There's an approved list of pesticides.
Yeah. All that's really good. Let's talk a little bit about as we close out here. So, someone sees a spotted lanternfly, you say they should kill it. You gave some advice previously about how to approach a spotted lanternfly. You did say,
from my experience.
Sure, and you did say they're not going to harm you, so they're not going to bite, they're not going to sting. How do you approach one if you're going to try to kill it?
I approach it from the front.
Okay.
It freezes, and then you squash them. If you approach from the back, I don't know, maybe it's some sense they have, they jump, and then they keep jumping.
Sure.
And then you're just playing a cat and mouse game at that point, where they will jump feet.
So if you see a spotted lanternfly, kill it.
Yes.
If you see its eggs, again, we talked about how to identify that. If you see its eggs,
put it in a Ziploc bag and alcohol.
What is it about the alcohol that?
It kills it. It kills the eggs.
And then should they just throw it away, or do you have to dispose of it in a special way? Throw it in the garbage?
Yeah, you can throw it away.
Okay. And then if you have at your home, if you have these plants or you see these in mass, you should use pesticides, get rid of the plants.
Yep.
Get rid of the insects.
Yep.
The best of your ability. Closing thoughts on this. Let me just kind of sum this all up. A lot of good information, a lot of good advice. In your mind, someone who is passionate about this, who sees this, who studied environmental engineering as your career field, how important is this issue for both the community as well as the agriculture community and the economy?
In my personal opinion, I think this is the biggest threat in the area to our local economy right now. It may seem like an insignificant 1-inch insect, but has a huge magnitude of an effect on the entire area.
And one that's continuously growing at this point.
Invasive species are a huge problem in this area, and this is honestly the worst one I've seen in my lifetime.
Wow. Well, we should do our best. Everyone has a role. We should do our best to get after it. Antonio, thank you for taking the time to explain this to us and to enlighten us.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Antonio, thank you. Last 2 weeks, you've enlightened us about this spotted lanternfly, the problem, the threat that it poses, and what we can do about it. And so we appreciate that, and hopefully our community can really use that information and get after this problem. As you know, we like to spend this last few minutes just getting to know our guests. Last week we talked about Major League Baseball, and we talked about your predictions in the World Series. And you called it for the Houston Astros. You never know. We had a previous guest who got, I think, both teams in the World Series right and got the winner wrong. But you're heavily involved working with students and mentoring young people in the Lehigh Valley. You spent the last several years as a football coach for Deer Area High School, or Deer High School in Allentown area, and you also coached Science Olympiad at Whitehall Middle School.
Yeah.
Why this investment? Why do you do this?
It's my way of giving back. I was a part of the Whitehall Middle School Science Olympiad team under Mrs. Neese, who still runs it to this day, and it had a large impact in my life, what I wanted to do in my life. So it's a way for me to give back, teach kids about science. And if I can make one kid enjoy science more, it makes it worth it. Especially this type of sciences that I enjoy, which are the geological and the engineering sciences. So that makes it worth it. And football's always been a big passion of mine, and I love the analytics side of it. And the kids mean so much to me, and I always say that these kids, they put their heart out and their soul out in this game, and I feel like you're kind of like a second guardian to them in a lot of ways. Yeah. And if any way I can help them, I offer help, to help them with their math homework, stuff like that. Anything I can do to help them get further, make them enjoy the sport, make them enjoy school more.
Yeah. You said you were part of the Whitehall Middle School Science Olympiad team.
Yes.
You studied engineering at Columbia.
Yes.
Did your involvement with science from such an early age impact you on that?
Absolutely. It led me to wanting to do that.
Is that kind of hope that you, as you give back, there'll be another Antonio Pineda who follows that same path?
Maybe not another Antonio Pineda, but someone that follows in that, and they'll love science enough to go follow a scientific or engineering career. Yeah.
Sure, that's great. As our viewers know, I am a firm believer in investing in young people and in their futures and their careers, and I appreciate that you do that. And so thank you so much again for all that you do and for joining us and for speaking to this topic.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. That is all the time that we have. My thanks to Antonio Pineda and also to you, our viewers, for tuning in week after week. Tune in again next week as we unpack another issue with another guest. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.